Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Kavinsky's Tutorials. Today I'm looking at RealBus by Toneboosters, which is a fantastic tape emulation. So it has tape saturation and a bunch of other stuff like wow-and-flutter, which I really love, where I'll look at all these things later in the video. It does different types of saturation. It's got this cool drive feature, which I'll talk about later in the video. Looks like an EQ, but it's not really an EQ. It's got a very good flanger and great stereo delays. Another very important thing to understand about this app is the difference between these four modes: recorder mode, insert, send, and master bus. Particularly, it's really important to understand the difference between insert, send, and recorder. If you don't, you might get this app and play around with things and not get the effects that you're expecting and wonder why. This is one of those apps I would strongly recommend reading the manual for. Although, if you watch this video, if you watch all of it, you're going to pretty much get this app without having to read the manual. So, later in the video, I'll do a full walkthrough. First, I just want to start by letting you hear what this can sound like. I want to focus on how to get these kind of Boards of Canada style distorted, warped tape sounds. And to do that, I've got 3 instances of NFM, and they're all being processed through RealBus. On one of them, I'm using a couple of instances of Wove as well. I'll analyze this setup later in the video too. Now I just want to play really. I'm putting in some sustained notes from AUM's keyboard, and then I'm also playing 2 instances of Velocity keyboard live here. So yeah, it might not be perfect, but give you an idea of how this can sound. And by the way, I've got today's video, I'm going to work through a few different AUM sessions. I usually do my videos in one take, but today I won't do it in one take because I'm going to be switching from one AUM session to another. Okay, so later in the video, I'll come back, if I have time, to the session we just heard and mention a few interesting things about that. But I want to take a different AUM session using an instance of noise, moving a choir, which is getting MIDI from piano motifs. Let me let you hear that dry. So I'm going to use this to demo some of the main features of the app. Okay, so by the way, I've got 3 codes to give away, 3 copies of the app to give away free to subscribers to the channel. So thanks a lot to Jeroen from Toneboosters for providing those. Look at the pinned comment at the top of the YouTube comment section for details of how to win. Winners will be announced 2 days after the release of this video. If you missed out on this, it probably means that you're not a subscriber or you're not getting notifications. So make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications. I usually have free copies of apps to give away with each video that I do. All right, so let's look here at this. So RealBus, as I said at the beginning, it is a kind of tape emulation. It does different types of saturation and so on. Also has the echo and flanger, but how the app behaves will depend on which mode we've selected here. So we have this master bus one. This is something that you could use to just apply effects to a whole track, for example, if you wanted. I mean, or you can just put it on one particular channel, right? Now, this is very similar in some ways to the recorder mode, but in the recorder mode, we have a lot more options. This will basically act like a tape recorder. And then we have the insert and send FX. So let's take a look at the manual and see clearly what is the difference between these. So here we have this section, recorder. In this mode, RealBus acts as a tape recorder simulator. All input signals are processed by the tape simulation effect and fed to the output of the plugin. So the important thing here is all inputs are processed. Now, if we look at send FX, for example, in this mode, RealBus only produces echo and flanging output contributions without outputting the original input. This mode is suitable for using RealBus as bus effect to produce tape echo and flanging. So here you're only going to hear the output of the echo and flanger. You won't hear any of the original input. Now the next one, insert FX mode. In this mode, RealBus produces the original unprocessed input as output. So it does output the signal that you put into it, but it is not processed. Then any flange or echo effects are added on top of that. So we'd use this if we're just looking for the tape echo and flanging. And then in the master mode, as I say, is similar to recorder, but it's much less useful in some ways because in the recorder, you've got a lot of control over exactly what's going on. For example, in wow-and-flutter, in the recorder section, we can control the amount and we can control the speed. But if we look at the master bus, all we have is one knob for wow-and-flutter. So this one is useful if you just quickly want to dial a few things in. But there's a lot of things we're not getting access to if we're using this master bus screen. For example, we're not getting this drive section. I don't think there's any flanger or echo either, right? Is there? Let's take a look. Right, yeah. No flanger or echo. All you've got is hysteresis, wow-and-flutter, record level, compression, and noise. So let's have a little listen to what these can do. So hysteresis is something that happens with magnetic tape. The actual technical description is a bit complex, but basically it often adds a sort of high frequency, distorted type of sound to signals. It might not be that noticeable on this sound, so we'll hear it later on some other stuff. But you can hear it here, it's just not super noticeable. Okay, wow-and-flutter. This will give these kind of slow or fast pitch changes. So it's a kind of vibrato, really. It's the sort of thing that you can get from a tape player, maybe an old reel-to-reel that isn't rotating accurately anymore, or a warped vinyl or something like that. And this is one of the coolest things that this app can do. So let's have a listen to that. You hear this lovely warped sound. So this is something that's really, really key to the Boards of Canada sound. I can't think of any Boards of Canada song that doesn't use this. Now, record level is also really cool. This will give a kind of clipping. So this is one of the differences between digital and analog recording. On digital, once you get over 0 decibels, I mean, it just sounds horrible. Digital clipping is not particularly enjoyable, but analog clipping can give this really nice, mellow sound, rich sound. Then, when you put it up higher, getting more into the realm of distortion. So this works like that. So putting this up here is like we're doing a hot, slightly too hot recording, or extremely hot recording. By the way, you can see here that when you press on a button, you will get some little help things that come up. To be honest, they're not very helpful. You're better reading the manual, I think. There's not enough detail in most of these little help things. The manual actually could also be a bit more detailed. It is a good manual, and it's a hell of a lot better than the manuals that many iOS app makers do. But it's really short on detail. Sometimes you might read something here and really wish that there was a little bit more detail on it. But it's, as I say, it's much better than your average manual. Okay. I mean, that's really a lot. So that's definitely getting into the realm of distortion. But let's just listen to, say, something around 5 or 6. We're just getting a richer, fuller, more analog sound. And then over here we have compression and noise. Compression is not really needed on this because there's not much variation in the volume levels. That's useful for smoothing out the transients and more dynamic inputs. Now, another really important thing is the tape speed here. So if we swipe down, we can come down to a lower tape speed, and a lot of these different things will be much more noticeable with lower tape speeds. Let's have a listen to that. For example, do you see how that hysteresis is a lot more noticeable with the low tape speed? So what I'll do is I'll put things on and then I'll play around with the tape speed and let you hear the differences. So particularly on the hysteresis and wow and flutter, tape speed makes a big difference. Okay, let's move on. So we still have noise here, but I've changed to the solo strings preset. Still getting input from piano motifs. Now let's look at a few other little things. Okay, so we have a high quality button here. Makes a bit of difference to the DSP, not really much. Doesn't really make any actually on this one, maybe a couple of percent. Now here we have tape stop effect, and we can change the speed, make it faster or slower, and same with start. Unfortunately, the start effect is really too fast in my opinion. But with the stop one we can get these nice slow stops. I don't understand why the start one doesn't have a longer option. Here we have the amount, so it's like a dry wet thing. Now let's play again. Let's look at recorder. This is the screen which I personally, the mode which I personally use most. So we have some preset stuff up here. So these are where the presets are. We can A and B presets here. We have an undo button, which is fantastic. That is so useful, so useful. We can copy things here and then go down and paste them in. To be honest, I don't really like the preset menu here. I find a lot of apps that come over from desktop have kind of horrible preset management systems. I'm not the only one who thinks this way. I usually save presets here in AUM. But I do love the undo feature. You can also change the colors of the interface. If you really like. Okay, so let's look at the tape section. So here, this is extremely important, extremely important. So this is similar to in the master bus, this record level thing. So here we're setting what they call the effective 0 decibel level. It means that anything that comes in over this level is going to get that kind of clipping sound that we were looking at when we were going to, say, 10 decibels and so on in that one. So let's hear in effect what that can sound like. Do you see how down here it's starting to distort? Because this is basically acting like a 0 decibel level. So everything that comes in after that is going to start to clip. So if you bring this down very far, things are going to start getting more distorted, and particularly at low tape speeds. You see that the tape speed makes a huge difference to this. This is the kind of thing I was saying, it's why you need to read the manual. Otherwise, unless you're very familiar with how tape works and stuff, which a lot of us today are not really, even people of my generation. I mean, I grew up using tapes, but I wasn't doing any kind of professional sound recording on tapes or anything. These are the kind of things that you might not be too familiar with. So this is the kind of thing, if you're not paying attention to this, you might really push the saturation here, but you won't hear very much. If you have this set up very high, even if you do a lot of saturation here, it's not going to make that much difference. especially if you're on higher tape speeds. Now, the drive section is really important as well for shaping the amount of saturation that we get and where the saturation comes in. So we can use this to boost certain frequencies. So if we do this, for example, the mid-range frequencies are going to have more saturation applied to them. And we can change the Q by dragging these two things. And here we have a low and high shelf. So this is something that you're going to want to play around with and experiment with what's going to sound good. Let's go back to tape. So let's look how the wow-and-flutter works in the recorder mode. So here we have amount and speed. Now, another thing, of course, you might want to do is automate these. It's a pity, really, there aren't any LFOs in here to do that. Well, what do? Go in and let's take a look at AUM, RealBus, parameters. Here we go. Wow-and-flutter amount, wow-and-flutter speed. So we can go in here, we can use something like MIDI LFOs, for example, which is an app I use a lot. I won't bring that up here. This video is going to be quite long already because there's a lot to go into. But yeah, so there you can use things like that. Modulating these is really what's going to be interesting. In the performance I did at the beginning of the video, it would have been more interesting if I was modulating some of these things on the instance that was being sustained by the notes from, or that had the sustained notes played on the AUM keyboard. That one I think would have been a really nice one to modulate a little bit. I'm going to bring the speed down, but I'm going to put this up a little bit. So when we increase hysteresis, we'll get more going on in the high frequencies. And probably particularly if the spectrum is up, this will make more noticeable the kind of irregularities that you get with tape in the lower and upper frequencies. So if we want to take down the amount of high in the hysteresis, the amount of high frequencies, we can pull down this makeup a little bit. So let me just go and experiment a little bit with these and maybe with the compression and stuff as well. Now, where is one that I like? So there's a guy called William Basinski, I think is the name, who did a famous experimental or ambient piece called Destruction Loops that basically played a bit of music that was on tape, and the tape was old, and the tape, sorry, it's called Disintegration Loops, not Destruction Loops, Disintegration Loops by William Basinski. And what you heard there was the tape, the content of the tape actually disintegrating in real time over the course of about an hour. And that sounds very similar to me, to some of what's going on with this wear, and also increases in hiss and asperity. Asperity is another type of noise, really. Let's have a listen to these. Now, how extreme you want to go with these really depends on the kind of sound you're going for. In many cases, it's going to sound a lot better subtle. So let me just now take this and put them down to something that gives a little bit of a tape effect, but is very subtle, and that sounds good to my ears right now. Okay, that sounds pretty cool. Now let's move on and take a look at the flanger and echo section. Okay, now let's take a look at the echo section. So there's also some flange going on here. I'm going to just let that go and focus on the echo. So the echo is turned off. Left echo. Right. Now, let me talk about what these different things do. So, okay, we have left and right. We can turn them on and off. So this can actually be quite nice to just turn on the left side or the right side. And then here we have a menu for these different options. So keep this just keeps it whatever way it's coming in. It doesn't pan it. But here we're panning it left. So this is panning. If we have a stereo input, it's panning both the left and right signals to the left. Well, the echo of those signals. Now it's panning the echoes to the right. Here it's doing a rotation. I talked about this in my video on stereo delay. Rotation is often more interesting than just a straight pan because it actually varies where in the stereo field it is. It uses an LFO to move things around. In my stereo delay vid for Blue Mango, the stereo delay is here, I mentioned that Hans from Blue Mango told me that as far as he knew, this was the only app that did that. Well, actually, Jeroen pointed out to me before I made this video, Jeroen, the dev of Toneboosters, that this is actually not true. And Toneboosters, RealBus, and one of their other apps as well has been doing this for years. So good to put the record straight there. Now, solo, this is something that is not in the manual. I really wish that developers would always remember to update their manuals when they add things. So anyway, I got in touch with Jeroen and he told me what it is. So the difference between pan left and solo left is that pan left will pan the summed input of the left and right, pan the echoes of those to the left or right. But here, this will just pan, if we do sol, it's only going to pan the echoes of the left signal to the left. So let's just go through those. If we go to send FX, we're only going to hear the output. We're only going to hear the echoes. Now we can change the delay times. We can sync or let it run free using these. And then very important, the high pass filter and low pass filter for each. Because especially if we're using high amounts, we're very likely to get crazy feedback and we need to rein that in by using these filters. You see, as soon as I bring down the high pass filter level here, we're going to start getting all kinds of stuff coming in, kinds of unwanted feedback. Or wanted. I mean, it's great if you get the sweet spot. So that's the echo. Let's move on and look at the flange. The flanger window is open here, but it's turned off. First, I'm going to let you hear a little bit of dry slide guitar that was really kindly provided by a guy called Ian Ruddock, who's a musician that is one of the subscribers to this channel. He won a code here, I think, at some point for an app, and so we've been in a bit of email contact since then. And I'm going to use his harp piece that he sent me in a video coming soon. But now let's use this slide guitar one. Really nice player, and he's up for collaborations and stuff. So look in the info section for this video in YouTube. I'll put his details there if you want to get in touch with him. All right, so let's listen to a little bit dry first. Oh, turn the volume up. Start that again. Okay, so you get the idea there. Now let's bring this in and put on a little bit of flange. So I'll just play around with things. Let me explain first. So here we have the on and off button. Here we have amount. Here we will have the delay time for the flanger. Here we have the duration of the LFO that will modulate the delay time. Here we have the depth of the modulation, and here the phase. So we can change the point that the LFO waveform is at. Okay, let's have a listen. So you can see here the depth. This is an average delay time, and then it's being adjusted by the depth. It's the kind of thing where less is more, so I'll tone it down a little bit. Okay, so that's the flanger. So now, before I finish up today's video, let's go back full circle and look at the session that I started the video with. So I have here NFM synth. Let's listen to that dry. I'm playing in from the keyboard in AUM here. So let's see what RealBus is doing. So you can see we've got quite a lot of all of these things going on, wow-and-flutter, wear, and so on. The saturation is pushed a little bit in the mid-range. Got the flanger on as well. And there's very heavy amount of echo here actually as well. So just going for a real distorted, gritty sound. But these two instances of wove, I really like what these are doing. So I'm using these to bring in some rhythmic element. So first we have one here that's just doing a very subtle thing. It's actually quite similar in a way to the wear in RealBus itself, but a bit more extreme and a bit more controllable. And then the second instance is much more rhythmic. Now, as I think I said earlier in the video, it would actually be really nice to modulate these with an LFO, at least the second one, to get some variation in the rate here. Now, in the second instance here, also an FM synth. Oh, hang on. Right, I love this. So let's see what RealBus is doing here. So first of all, the echo is a really important part of this sound. Let's turn the echo off. Now, there is echo going on in the FM synth itself, and I want to keep that, but this is adding another echo on top. I really like using multiple delays. Listen especially for some higher frequency sounds with that echo that RealBus is adding. We've got Flanger as well. Turn it off. So it's subtle what that's adding, but I like it a lot. Let's just take RealBus off for a second. Put it on again. That flanger is adding a really nice subtle movement, and there's just a bit more stuff going on in the high frequencies, which is a really interesting thing to add to the bass. Okay, now then we have this instance. Let's change the number of rows. I love Velocity Keyboard, but I hate the way it does this. It doesn't remember the rows that you leave it set at. When you have several instances in a session, it seems to, for some reason, default to putting both the same, even if they've been set up differently. If you noticed earlier in the video, I had one of these that was set up with one row and the other one that was set up with 4 or 5. But for some reason now, coming back in and opening it up, it hasn't retained that, it hasn't remembered that. I've contacted Hans from Blue Mango about this, and I hope it can get sorted out. So let's take RealBus off this instance. Now I'm also using FAC Maxima here to just make this louder. It's a very useful plugin because I just wanted this to stand out in the mix more. Let me take Maxima off. So you see there's already some noise in this. But the original one does not have any of this lovely wow and flutter and so on. This is really Boards of Canada right here. So there we go. I think this is a great plugin. I love those kind of wow and flutter effects. The delay gives you a lot of control because of its stereo nature and these filters here, as well as the ability to choose what you do over here in terms of panning, rotation, and so on. Whether you're feeding all the inputs towards the left or towards the right or whatever. Great flanger. The flanger can go for a really long time, 20 seconds duration there on the LFO. In the sync mode, let's see, we can, let me use my finger, right. There we can see the times that are available in the synced mode. The delay goes really long, up to 30 seconds. That is much, much longer than the Blease Flanger, just to take one example that I compared it with. I can't remember how high that goes. It's maybe 10, 15, something like that. This can do really, really long delay times. Other things like TFX mod, I think does even shorter times. Can't remember again exactly how long that does. So great plugin. Not to mention, of course, the saturation effects and so on, hiss and things like that. The drive feature is really cool, enabling you to dial in the sound exactly the way you want it. So great plugin. Toneboosters just do really quality, really value plugins. The only criticism I would make is that sometimes in the smaller window sizes, I find that I don't get great responsiveness when I'm trying to adjust these sliders. When it's small, maybe when it's smaller than this, I sometimes have to press a few times. I mean, if you look here, there's a lot of wasted space between these. I would really like thicker sliders that were more responsive to fingers. As we get more developers porting apps from desktop, I think this is becoming more and more important. I really want to see devs doing their apps for desktop, but with an eye to iOS. Audio damage, for example, despite all their faults on the iOS platform of some unreliability issues with apps and things, are good for that. They're really doing interfaces that are perfect for a touchscreen device. So a lot of other desktop developers could learn from that. And that's the only real criticism that I would make of the Toneboosters plugins. They're amazing quality. This guy, Jeroen, if you read people's comments in places like Gear Slots Forum, for example, people highly respect this guy, and he clearly knows a hell of a lot about audio. I think he's got a PhD and stuff like that, so they really know what they're doing sound-wise. These are amazing value on iOS, even on desktop as well. Their prices are pretty incredible, really, for the sound quality. All right, thanks everyone. I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.